Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Herbal Knowledge Keepers with Dakota Granny Woman and myself, Blue Star Deer Woman. And again, this episode is based upon the Herbal Knowledge database, the herbaldatabase.org, and is to demonstrate how you can become empowered as your own healer and knowledge keeper. And today, the theme of our episode is on Yellow Dock. So we will begin with a presentation from Dakota, and we will demonstrate on the herbal database. And we also encourage you to always come visit us at the Facebook group page, Herbal Knowledge Keepers. So enjoy.
All right, folks. So, yes, we're continuing our series on the fall root. We're looking at the opening screen of the database, and to get to Yellow Dock, we're going to use this little search box. I think today, let's just start with the genus, and the genus is Rumex. It's a good idea to learn something about the genus of these plants because there are a lot of interesting relationships. So here we have Rumex, the genus, and the reason that it's colored blue is because all of the plants in the Rumex genus are edible. This is a wild edible. And I'm going to click on this upward arrow to show the information panel. This is a study that was done reviewing the ethnobotanical uses of the Rumex species. And I thought it was pretty interesting, so I included it under this genus area, saying that Rumex species have emerged as a good source of traditional medicine for the treatment of inflammation, cancer, and different bacterial infections, and provides new insights for further promising investigations on isolated compounds. So in other words, they're looking now seriously at Rumex to create, of course, new drugs, but we know that we can use the plant as is for beautiful therapeutics. And so we're going to go through some of that now. There are a lot of species, about 200 species of Rumex, and you'll see that some of them are sorrels. In general, the smaller Rumex species are called sorrels, and the larger ones are called docks. So we have all of these different types of docks, and we're going to focus here on Yellow Dock today. So let's just go ahead and click on that. Yellow Dock is a little bit tricky because it looks very much like certain other docks, like a broadleaf dock. Another name for Yellow Dock is curly dock, Rumex crispus. Okay, so have you used this, dear woman, at all?
You know, I haven't. I've never been called to Yellow Dock, but I've had it growing in areas that I've lived.
Uh-huh. Most people have, and it tends to be overlooked. Like I said, some people just yank it out of their gardens.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny, earlier in the spring, when I had a class here, one of the students is a holistic veterinarian, and we went out to the garden, and he was so excited to see all of this Yellow Dock, and he started pulling up roots, with permission, of course, because he uses so much of it in treating animals. It's one of his key herbs for healing animals. So
what preparation does he put it in?
He tinctures it.
Okay.
So Yellow Dock is really well known for a kind of an alterative for cleansing the different types of fluids in the body, lymph, blood, interstitial tissues. It helps the liver and gallbladder, and it's fairly well known among herbalists as being a useful, gentler type of purgative laxative. That's because it has, if you look over here in the phytochemicals, you'll see the anthraquinones. And those are fairly strong purgatives. You'll see them in Cascara sagrada, in the aloe resin, and in senna leaf, and that's what makes for a very strong purgative laxative, and it can be rather painful. If you've ever taken one of these, you can really get some pretty serious cramps while it's doing its job. So they're usually combined with some type of carminative like cardamom or ginger or something to just lessen that effect. But with yellow dock, it is much gentler. It has enough of that anthraquinone to do the job for constipation, but it's modified a little bit with some of the tannins in yellow dock. So you don't get that really intense purgative action or the cramping or anything like that. In fact, if you have a child that has become constipated for whatever reason and you're looking for something gentle to use that's effective, yellow dock is perfect. And you're using the root of that, of course. That's what we're talking about.
Do you have a picture on there on the side of yellow
Not
dock?
on that, but I do have images here. And I don't even remember why I did that, why I put images here, but because that's not something I do anymore. But
Oh, good.
I
Yeah,
revisited
I
this.
like it.
Yeah,
I always like to see the pictures. Yeah, that should be familiar to a lot of people. Anyone who has
absolutely.
gardens, yellow dock grows a lot around here.
It does. And unfortunately, though, I was looking for studies on yellow dock, and they're hard to come by. There aren't very many. There are a lot of studies on rumex, different rumex species, but not specifically on yellow dock. One of the ones I ran across said that one of the effects of climate change is that yellow dock may disappear.
Hmm.
I was really shocked to read that. I hope that's not true. But it
Oh,
means,
well, I wonder, what is it about the climate change that would make them disappear?
well,
And what is it they need to grow in?
they need moisture, they need they need a temperate climate. And I guess, I don't know that it would disappear everywhere, maybe
Hmm.
just in certain areas, and that's what I would think. But they considered yellow dock an at-risk plant due to climate change.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Especially since it seems like such a hardy
yeah,
plant.
yeah. So we're going to talk about some of the lesser known things that yellow dock does for us. And
Hmm.
first, we're just going to scroll along the top. Everybody looks at the scroll bar here while I drag it. And this shows you some of the different conditions it helps treat. So we see that it's a depurative, that's a blood purifier, and it's for general fluids dyscrasia. In Greek medicine, that just means that you've got different types of impurities and imbalances in the various fluids in the bodies. It's a pretty general description. And that can include lymph. This means that if you're going to tincture it, this is the ratio of alcohol to water that you want, a 40 to 55%, to get the most out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We see here that it benefits the skin and promotes cleansing. Cleansing comes up again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Let's drag this. So it helps to resolve tumors.
What kind of, when we talk about purifying the fluids in the body, what exactly would we be addressing? Like, for instance, in the blood, what would want to be purified?
Well, for example, there could be lipopolysaccharides, and those come from when bacteria die, and they can die anywhere, but they release these lipopolysaccharides. That's one thing.
Mm.
There can be if people have leaky gut,
Mm-hmm.
there could be foreign material that's gotten into the bloodstream that
Mm-hmm.
obviously being cleaned out primarily by the liver and the kidneys, that sort of thing. But this works on those systems to improve their ability to clean that out. So we think of it as a liver tonic and as something that helps with the bile. So it's those kind of cleansing systems. It's not like the yellow dock is going into the blood itself and creating direct changes on the constituents in the blood, and the same with the other fluids in the bodies. It's working on the systems that keep those normal.
So a question I have, I'm just very aware of in Puerto Rico right now from the devastation. They're having some kind of symptoms from contaminated water.
That can be a lot of things, but some of that, the fear is usually cholera with that sort of thing. And in fact, the biggest cholera epidemic that's happened in generations is going on now in Yemen. Some 800,000 people have contracted cholera there. But there can be other, like giardia, parasitic types of infections, or maybe it's actual toxins from from chemicals that were released into the. So this is good in that it's helping to support the different systems in the body that are there in place to cleanse the body and rid the body of foreign substances. So it's just kind of general purpose that way. It helps to get rid of abscesses and alterative. Like that's again another term that just refers to this ability of an herb to support the detoxification processes in the body. Now we see anemia, and one of the things that's really interesting about yellow dock is it's a great source of iron, and not all iron is equal. So the kinds of iron that we can get from plants is better absorbed by the body, and it doesn't tend to accumulate the way certain other types of iron do. So, and yellow dock is about 4%, the root is about 4% iron. That's kind of not the only reason it's yellow, but that's a signature for it.
That just answered maybe the reason I've never been drawn to yellow dock is I have a real repulsion in my body for towards iron.
Yeah, and that can very well be. There are conditions where people accumulate too much iron, and that's really dangerous. So you don't want too much or too little. So it may be, if you don't want iron, that yellow dock would not be your plant. With women who are pregnant, sometimes doctors recommend iron supplements to them, and those supplements are really not that great. They can have some pretty harsh effects on the body, and one of those can be constipation. So it's better for women to take powdered yellow dock, and the yellow dock, they're for pregnant women, and the obtaining the iron that they need, that is here in the database under yellow dock. And one of the things that people can do with it if they don't like the kind of irony taste is use the yellow dock powder in your curry mixes if you want to add iron to your diet. And the curry covers up the taste of the yellow dock, so it's really quite a nice way to do it. So just going back up here for a minute, some of the other things that it does, so it's good for chronic arthritis and bladder stones, boils, gout, hyperacidity, fatigue, tiredness. It's a lipid portal stimulant, and here we see in Chinese medicine some of the terms So for liver stagnation, liver cheese stagnation, any kind of lymphatic congestion, swollen. Now the malaria is really interesting. We didn't know that yellow dock had an effect on malaria, and that was revealed through studies on one of its constituents here called, I'm not sure how that's pronounced, but Nipodin, I think. And studies on that showed that that compound is powerfully anti-malarial even in infected animals. So it's not just with cultures or anything like that that they're testing it, but in living animals infected with malaria, this compound killed off directly those parasites. The yellow dock root is more commonly used medicinally, not as an edible. The leaf and seeds are what we go for in terms of edibility. And so we do have some recipes here on using the leaves, and I think they're really, really delicious. Let's see what we've got here. Pizza with yellow dock and potatoes, yellow dock enchiladas, dock and lentil soup. That's really good. Combining it with burdock. And once again, I will mention seeds because you probably have them hanging around if you've got yellow dock. And the seeds make a wonderful flour. So you have recipes down here for different ways of making pancakes and crackers and things like that with the seeds.
And I'm sure you can always hydrate them and make chips.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
right?
and and with the leaves, if you've ever made kale chips, you can do the same thing with the yellow dock leaves, and they're huge, so you can make nice, great, big, tasty yellow dock leaf chips, and those leaves are super high in vitamin A. In fact, that's one reason why you have to be careful not to eat too many, because you can overdose on vitamin A eating yellow dock leaves.
I have a question about that Nepidin that you just spoke of in relation to malaria. What exactly does the Nepidin work on in the malaria?
Okay, let's pull it up. Let's see. Of course, this is all in science speak. I'm looking for the easy place. It's talking about how they measured the anti-malarial activity in animal tests. And here it's working on certain enzymes. It showed a potential selective inhibition. I'm not going to read all those.
Okay. So an inhibitor of the disease.
Yeah, of the concentration of the parasite, and it says in the animal test, all groups that were treated with it were active with the suppression of, they're calling it, the term is parasitemia, which is, basically just the malarial parasite. So it suppressed that, and the survival time with Nepidin treatment was increased, and you've got all these numbers, at each dose. So this study newly identified the plant Rumex crispus, or yellow dock, containing Nepidin, which is a potential anti-malarial compound, and it inhibited and prolonged the survival time, and it inhibited the parasitemia in the animal test. But also it's anti-diabetic.
And it looks like, from what you just read earlier, that it develops the immunity. It's like no?
I don't think it's, I'd have to read this again more carefully, but I don't think it's working through the immune system.
Oh, maybe that's not the right word, but it sounded like the more you take, the stronger.
Yeah, it's dose dependent.
Yeah.
So
it's like it builds.
Yeah, and of course that was just on this one compound. So it's always difficult to jump from that to the plant itself and say that it has enough of this to
Yeah.
use for against malaria, right?
Yeah.
However, including it is just part of your strategy. Now, this
Mhm.
could also be what's interesting is a lot of times these new scientific findings inform traditional use. So we see, for example, that it is limiting or inhibiting the ability of these parasites to take over the body, right? So
Mhm.
that could be understood as blood purifying,
Mhm.
according to the old way of thinking,
Mhm.
right? So
Right. Mhm.
malaria is a well-known ancient disease, and if people were using this and in dealing with that sort of situation, and who knows, it may work against other parasites in a similar way. We don't know. We still have a
Well,
lot to learn.
that's so helpful. It's so helpful to break it down and see the constituents of it
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
because now we're going deeper in our knowledge about herbs, which it only makes sense with the times and evolution. And
Yeah.
so as we start to identify different constituents, uh, we almost become more biochemists,
Yeah.
if that's the right word.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing here, just jumping to diabetes, which is another serious situation, that
Mhm.
this constituent in yellow dock helps us uh, take up glucose, and
Mhm.
that's so that turns it into an anti-diabetic, and that's another situation with fluid dyscrasia, or a fluid imbalance is sugar in the blood, too much glucose. That's a serious, serious thing. So if this component in yellow dock is helping us to take glucose into tissues rather than having it left in the blood, it's a high glucose level.
Right.
Here again, it's it being an alternative, a blood purifier.
You know, Dakota, it wouldn't surprise me. It's probably already out there, but software, you know how we can have our astrology done? Uh,
Yeah,
like a software that's going to have, all those little broken down boxes of our biochemistry. And
yeah.
we're going to be able to identify to the T, like it's going to say, Nepidin over here is only 10%. It should be 30%.
Oh, we already have that. Believe me,
Right?
we do.
Yeah. It's
And
just not a layman interface yet.
it is if you look in the section of the database under lab tests or
Okay.
diagnostics, and you
Hmm.
start going through that, you'll find lab tests that do uh, test your immune system, that test your nutrient profile, that test all of that, and have it
Okay.
all laid out like that. And it's a lot. Those kind of tests are used a lot in functional medicine to tell
Mm.
us exactly what it is that we're low in, what we need, what we have too much of. So that is definitely all out there. But then again, with the plants, if you realize that of all the potentially medicinal plants that exist in the world, it's
Mhm.
been suggested in science that, well, it's been stated rather clearly that only 10% of all the plants in the world have been studied at all for
Wow.
their medicinal activity and nutritive
Mm.
activity. So we're just at the very, very beginning of this.
Mhm. Okay.
So these are some other really interesting chemicals, compounds that are in yellow dock, and I would invite everybody to come and learn about those too, because they do kind of help paint the picture of why this plant does what it does.
Mhm.
So just kind of going along here again, um, atonic ulcer, debility, gout. I think we were almost at the end of this last time. pelvic inflammatory disease, pelvic congestion, more cleansing. And so skin eruptions, it helps clear the skin partially because of what it's doing through the liver, the gallbladder, that sort of things. Even helps with syphilis and infected wounds. So, and it's an anti-tumor plant. So
Right.
let's just
Does
pick up.
it
Yeah, go ahead.
serve us to, say, pull up the plant and chew on the root, or is that not
It,
necessarily recommended?
well, no, it wouldn't hurt you, but you wouldn't enjoy it probably. But I don't know. Some people might. I can't speak for everybody.
It's a bitter, isn't it? Isn't it a
Yeah,
bitter?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's bitter. In fact, the qualities are right here, a bit bitter. So it's not one of our strong bitters. And remember, when we use that term bitter, we're not just talking about the way it tastes to us.
Mm-hmm.
For example, ginseng, if you take a bite of ginseng, in this country, we're probably going to say, ooh, that's bitter. But in China, they call it sweet. And of course, different cultures have a little bit different way of thinking about things. But part of this is just what we're used to eating. So here, another way to think of it is that a bit bitter means that it does some of the things that bitters do, but it's not real strong in that way. And
Okay.
it's astringent, meaning it helps to draw tissues together. And that would be the tannins in it. And it's cold, and what that means is that it's in herbal energetics, looking at the thermal aspect, cold means that it is going to be fairly strong in reducing heat signs or infection, hot situations in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And dry means that it's going to help dry up overly moist tissue conditions. And so then we've got these are secondary types of qualities. That dissolving, that's why it's useful for tumors. Decongesting, good, that's an activity we see in the lymph system, why it's good for swollen glands. It's restoring, and we could think right away, okay, yeah, there's all that iron in there, right? And what we just saw with Anepidin, that it's helping glucose go to where. So there's a lot of reasons why it would be restoring. And astringent, again, it's tightening tissues up. It's giving them tone. So here we see some of the areas of the body that it focuses on. And then remember, this part is a blend of traditional Chinese terminology, Greek terminology, and Western terminology describing what it does. So, folks, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but just to kind of skim through a few things, we see that it's good for mouth, gum, throat inflammation. So there you could take that root, and the raw root or the powder, and make a gargle or a mouthwash. And so for skin eruptions, nettle rash, scurvy, syphilis, and if you understand Chinese medicine, it helps you kind of drill down a little bit, because some skin problems are related to something called liver and kidney qi stagnation. So if that is the cause of the skin problem, if it's due to liver and kidney qi stagnation, Yellow Dock is for you. And in terms of creating a striction or tightening, it does that while it's also removing congestion, which is pretty interesting. It promotes tissue repair. So we see that it helps with fibroids and tumors of the reproductive organs. And it helps to restore the blood and generate strength, anemia, diabetes supportive. So let's go down to preparation. Here we see that the decoction, fluid extract, and tincture are good for internal and external use. So you can make salves, washes, fomentations, and use those on joints. Now, red dock is another kind of Rumex species, and you can substitute it, but it isn't as strong. And this is where things are tricky, because sometimes, like, it's really hard to tell the difference between curly dock and broadleaf dock, for instance. And you wonder, well, do they do the same thing? So I don't have to be so fussy about it. And the answer is they probably work very similarly, but we know that this is the one that we really prefer. Why? Is it just habit, or is it because it's more effective? I don't know the answer to that. I would like to know the answer to that, but I don't. The root should be dug up August to October. And so dosage, put 1 to 2 teaspoons of the root in a cup of water, bring it to a boil, simmer gently for 10 to 15 minutes, and take it 3 times a day. Here we've got the tincture. And it's a good, yellow dock is one of our combining herbs. It's very often combined with other herbs. And so dandelion, burdock, and cleavers, that's a combo that Hoffman recommends. That would be very cleansing and supportive. And then we've got more notes to read about yellow dock here, which I'm not going to go through. Y'all can go to the database and read up on this. And then as far as cautions, always check that. Not really much on this. Caution in pregnancy, not to be used long term. But if you were pregnant and needed a laxative, this would probably be one of the better ones because it's so mild. I invite everybody to come to the database, jump in here, learn more about it, and do something with that yellow dock if you're lucky enough to have it.
Right on. All right. So good health to everyone, and a reminder that, the Herbal Database is a subscription database, and it assists in the continuation of more resources that Dakota is on a daily basis adding. And a reminder, too, that if you have additional research that you feel would be supportive and you can see where it belongs in the database, just contact Dakota, and she'll include it.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, everybody. It was wonderful being with you again, and we'll be back with more programming. We have big plans. So stay tuned. Check us out on Facebook. Love y'all.